travel isn't just about destinations. It's about the people you meet, the cultures you immerse yourself in, the stories you carry home. I'm Relebogile Mabocha, and on my travel feature, I take you on a journey beyond the guidebook. Each week, I connect with fellow travelers, insiders, and storytellers to bring you the heart of every place. Whether it's a hidden gem right here in South Africa or a dream destination abroad. Join me as we travel through conversations, memories, and inspiration. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
And now, The Money Show
with Stephen Grootes on 702.
Let's walk the talk.
The Money Show with Stephen Grootes is brought to you by Absa Corporates, an investment bank, proud sponsor of the African Blockchain Report 2024. Good evening. I'm Stephen Grootes. Glad you're with us for the Friday edition of The Money Show. A lot to come, and I think a lot of the world kind of on tenterhooks ahead of next week. The 9th of July is the technical deadline for the end of the Trump tariff pause. There's really no better headline than that particular phrase. I don't know how else to describe it. You'll recall what he called Liberation Day, all the tariffs that were imposed. Poor Lesotho got smacked, so did we. And then it was all paused for a period of 90 days. Well, that runs out on the 9th, and European stocks were down a percentage point simply on the basis that no one really knows what's going to happen next week. There was some noises from the Trump administration that it looked like, in fact, some countries would be told today what was going to happen to them. We still, at this point, certainly I don't know what is going to happen to us, and very, very difficult to forecast anything coming out of the Trump administration when it comes to Trump and trade and tariffs at the moment. All I can say is probably still good for the gold price. Anyway, we'll talk about that in a little while. Stats SA, and this was confirmed in Business Day, one or two other publications had it as well, that Stats SA is going to start looking at a sort of statistical register of the informal economy. And I was wondering how you would go about it. There will be ways, because people have been measuring informal economies for years. I mean, you don't have to go and ask someone, what are you doing? You can stand on a pavement and count. I would think that that would probably work. You could just be that simple, and you could stand on a pavement over the course of a week, maybe outside Chris Hani Baragwanath Hospital, for example, near the taxi rank there, and sort of try and get an assessment of how much business is done. There'll be all sorts of ways that you can do it. I do wonder what it will tell us. And the point I just keep making is it doesn't really matter how you define employment. That's not the issue. We want to get as many people having sustainable incomes as possible, and those that have incomes already, we want to increase those incomes. That's really what you want to do. You want to help people out of poverty and make them richer. And that's really the whole point of all of this. I do think it's going to be very interesting to see how it all pans out and how it is done. A little bit of a task for Stats SA, and let me just say I do have a little bit of sympathy for the counters here, because they don't have money to do what they're supposed to be doing already. Their budget deficit is huge. There's quite a large number of vacancies. They've been very upfront and honest about this for the last few years. So tough times for Stats SA, I think. And of course, there was a whole big fight over the census and all the rest. We don't need to go into that now. But I do think quite a tough time for Stats SA to now be asked to take on more work. So I'm not offering to count, because that would not be my strength, but certainly I do have some sympathy for Sengo Malaleka, the Statistician General, and others working in that office. Good to hear from you this evening. Don't forget the Friday Biz Blitz a little later. We'll be talking about the Durban July as well. You can give us your view on 011 883 0702 021 446 0567 and voice notes tonight on 072 702 1702.
The Money Show
With Stephen Grootes, live on 92.7 and 106 FM. Streaming on the Prime Media Plus app.
and DSTV channel 856.
Quite a lot on the plate of the Trade Industry and Competition Minister, Parks Tau, at the moment. He's going to be the person who will really have to deal with the Trump administration. We understand that he suggested there should be a little bit of a delay in any kind of tariff implementation. Other countries, I'm sure, have said the same thing to the US. He was in Parliament today, and Tau saying that he believes the 100 billion rand transformation fund is gaining traction. Companies would pay into the fund as part of their BEE requirements. That money would then be used to help black-owned firms. There's been a big debate about all of this, as you can imagine. Duma Gqubule is an economist and research associate at the Social Policy Initiative. Duma, good evening. Good to talk again. We've seen some organised business groups supporting the fund. Some have argued, I think, quite strongly against it. Others have asked for basically a bit more information. How do you see this fund? Do you think it's going to happen?
Let me just say that I'm doing a study for an organization called Trade and Policy Strategies on the Transformation Fund, and I haven't really finished my investigation into it. But what I can say, Steve, is that on the demand side, there is a credit gap of about up to 350 billion rands for SMMEs. Depending on which study you look at. That's number one. There's huge demand for funding for SMEs, especially black SMEs. Now, on the supply side, the banks, the last time they reported BASA, Banking Association of South Africa, their requirements in terms of the financial sector charter, reporting requirements, which have changed a few years ago, they said this is about just before COVID. The total balance sheet, I think it was 2020, the total balance sheet exposure of banks to black SMMEs was 21 billion rands. And that is about 0.3 or 4% of their total assets. So I believe that we're not dealing with normal risk aversion towards SMMEs that you find everywhere in the world. I believe that you're dealing with racial profiling of black SMMEs. That's number one. Number two is that the government's contribution towards funding of black SMMEs is completely inadequate. Let's start with Small Enterprise Finance Agency. It's about 2 billion rands in the last financial year, national annual report. The National Empowerment Fund last year was about 800 million rands. And I have to say that the National Empowerment Fund, for 21 years, it has had clean audits. It got a capitalization of 2 billion rand when it started, and it has recycled this money for 2 decades. And this is an organization that has done a bloody good job, and it has loaned 15 billion rands to SMMEs, and it has got no government support. It's got clean audits for 2 decades. But I don't understand why the government doesn't want to support it. So I just want to say, first thing, this transformation fund mustn't be a substitute for what government should do by providing more financing for black SMMEs, especially organizations like the National Empowerment Fund, which does a bloody good job of what it's doing, and Small Enterprise Finance Agency. So we must provide financing to those organizations and obviously resuscitate the land bank. I don't know what the situation is there. I actually don't understand what it is. Yeah. And then in terms of the Transformation Fund, Steve, what they're saying is that they just believe there's 20 to 30 billion rands that is there in company funds. But I think there'll be a surprise. I don't think there's as much money floating around as people think, but I'm still doing the investigation. But I think companies have found ways to game the system. Let me give you an example. Back in the day, I went to see a large retailer, one of the biggest ones in South Africa, and they said the way we comply with the BEE codes, the enterprise and supply development, there's a target of 3% of net profit after tax, is that we give our black distributors, the largest ones, payment in 7 days, and we get most of our points. So companies have found lots of ways to game the system and get the maximum points here. Yeah.
Okay, I mean, I have no doubt companies do all sorts of things. Your point about racial profiling, I'm not going to say it's not true, but let me put this to you. During COVID, there was the 500 billion rand government guaranteed scheme. So in other words, if banks lent money to companies so that they could keep going during COVID, that money was guaranteed. And yet very little of it was taken up. Does that not just maybe, weaken your argument about racial profiling?
Okay, so first of all, it was 200 billion rands, the loan guarantee fund. It was a complete flop. So the banks only lent out about 20 billion rands. Now, you could argue that, it was a difficult time when there was no demand. I don't know. The economy had shut down, and that's number one. Number two, the government was really dumb about this. You're supposed to, if you're giving this guarantee, you're supposed to say, tell us your beneficiaries, is it black, white, women, and youth, and so on. But they never put any conditions for this. So we don't know up to this day who got funding of that 18 billion or 20 billion. And we don't know to this day, but I think most South Africans believe that it's mostly white people who got the funding.
Okay, but my point is that if the money is guaranteed by government, wouldn't banks have tried to lend? Wouldn't banks have then definitely lent it to black businesses? Is my point.
No, we believe that they lend it to white businesses. They're usual white clients. So because we don't know otherwise. But the point, what I'm trying to say is that if there's such a risk aversion that even when there's a guarantee, they're not prepared to lend. That is a serious problem that we have to address separately.
One of the other points, and let me just put this to you because it's sort of my theme for the last week in my own head, is we keep talking about interventions to help the economy. And let me just be clear about what I think we need to do. We need to make it easier for black people to start businesses and employ people, right? That's for this conversation. That's what I'm talking about. So we could do another intervention. We've had endless debates about interventions. This is one of them. Or we could just say to government, do what you are supposed to do well. I'm talking about services, the rule of law, all of those sorts of things. I mean, if government did what it was supposed to do, wouldn't that be far more powerful than any intervention?
I think you're right, because what does government do? Government provides, most of it is teaching, education. It provides health. Correctional services, and this is the so-called frontline services. That is the majority of what government does. So if you can get the schools and the hospitals working fine, and then the third one, Stephen, that I think is so unbelievable, infrastructure. I did a calculation recently. Over the past 10 years, there has been a real per capita collapse in public investment of 40%. That is why all our cities and towns are dangerous slums and filthy slums. So what logic is there in not providing us with the infrastructure that we need to operate? So I would agree with you. If we can get the schools right, the hospitals right, the prisons, the correctional services, the infrastructure, what government is supposed to do, it makes no sense for them to be cutting public investment, because public investment has got such high multipliers. In the budget 2.0 that was withdrawn, they say 1 rand that is spent on construction creates 1.86 for GDP, and 1 million rand that we spend on construction creates 3 jobs for people whose highest level of education is a matric certificate. Now, those are the type of jobs that we need, because our country, the majority of people don't have the education. I just don't understand, because in the budget itself, it's providing such a compelling case for us to be, the politicians talk about creating South Africa into a construction site. But now, it's not a construction site. It's filthy and dangerous slums that we're having throughout our country. And we've had 4 days without water in most parts of Johannesburg. Yeah. It's just incredible. Yeah.
Duma, thank you so much. Duma Gqubule is an economist and research associate at the Social Policy Initiative.
The Money Show on 702.
Monday to Friday, 6 to 8 p.m.
Well, earlier this week, you heard Time Bank continuing their insistence that the Home Affairs Department is being unreasonable by quite significantly increasing the price of verifications against the National Population Register. The Home Affairs Minister, Leon Schreiber, has told you before that banks were behaving badly, they abused the system, and that he couldn't maintain the system unless banks and other financial institutions did pay more per verification. Marius Coetzee is the MD at Ideco Biometrics. Marius, good evening. It's been quite interesting to watch this debate. Strong points on both sides, I think. How do you see it? Does Time Bank have a point?
Stephen, good evening. Sorry. Yes, I would definitely support Time Bank. The reality is that if a minister calls it abuse, I think the minister is missing a major point. And that is in terms of that government has this sole database in the country in terms of who is who, the National Citizen Register. On the other side, there's many regulatory requirements, FICA, RICA, anti-money laundering, etc., that basically puts the onus onto the industry to make sure that they know who they are dealing with. Now, theoretically, in my opinion, government should be offering the ID verification services as a service to the industry because industry has the obligation to verify who they're dealing with. Now, to call it abuse, in my opinion, is definitely the wrong approach. For the simple reason, government should be enabling industry to be effective, to be compliant, to be know who they're dealing with, to manage their risk, to enable them to actually do things like protecting the privacy of their customers, etc., etc.
Okay, so then how would government pay to maintain the service? And one of the big problems they've had is because fees were so low, the system was offline 40% of the time.
Well, there could be many reasons why the system is offline. In those cases, if a bank system is offline, then it's a matter of there's some, I don't want to call it incompetency, but there's some technical irregularity in the system itself. The fact that the system is overloaded is perhaps because the service is not offered the way it's supposed to be. And if we just look at the cost of the actual verification transaction, to verify some data that's somewhere on a database, the physical cost of that is actually minimal in compared to what the government is actually asking at this stage. So 15 cents per transaction, maybe that is too low, but to just increase it to 6,500%, to take it up to 10 rand per transaction. That doesn't make sense.
Okay, but that is during the peak time, basically during business hours. I mean, a bank can still get it for 1 rand at off-peak, and surely that's still relatively cheap. We're talking about institutions that make quite a lot of money, and I've been interested that some banks, including Capitec, have backed Home Affairs on this one.
Well, the question that I'm asking myself is why do some of the major banks do not respond against this announcement? Now, the only logical conclusion that I can make, and keep in mind that IDECA has helped many of the banks in the past to actually design their biometric verification platform in terms of how the architecture should look, what standards to comply with, what technology to use in terms of capturing the fingerprints at the branches, etc., etc. So we've got good experience in this case. The point I'm getting at is that the reason why, in my opinion, the reason why most of the banks are not responding is because they already have all their customers' biometric information on their own systems. So they do not have to go back into Home Affairs every time that the verification needs to take place. The reason why Time Bank specifically is objecting this much is because they're a new bank, and now suddenly I think the figures I've read somewhere is 100,000 new customers per month. Now, where that 100,000 would have been 15,000 rand in terms of verification fees, now we suddenly be talking 150 million rand per month for that type of verification. So, again, something doesn't gel somewhere.
Marius Coetzee, thanks very much indeed, MD at Ideco Biometrics. I suspect this argument, let me call it a debate rather, we're among friends, is going to continue for a little while. All right, due to speak to Patrick Matidi, the head of multi-asset strategies at Alawani Capital, in just a moment. Quite a lot going on in terms of the US at the moment after the passing of the big, beautiful bill over the week, during the week. But more importantly, I suppose, is the uncertainty about what is likely to happen next week when the Trump tariff pause comes to an end. Will there be a taco? Will Trump chicken out again? Or will there be something else? And this is one of the difficulties. No one can actually say what is going to happen. As always, very, very complicated to try and predict the future in this case. We'll hear from Patrick Matidi in a few moments.
Travel isn't just about destinations. It's about the people you meet, the cultures you immerse yourself in, the stories you carry home. I'm Relebogile Mabotja, and on my travel feature, I take you on a journey beyond the guidebook. Each week, I connect with fellow travelers, insiders, and storytellers to bring you the heart of every place. Whether it's a hidden gem right here in South Africa or a dream destination abroad. Join me as we travel through conversations, memories, and inspiration. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
WhatsApp Stephen
on 072
702
1702.
Well, views coming through, of course, on 072 702 1702 tonight. S&P suggesting that, in fact, South African banks are now in what they call an expansionary phase. And I think we see the evidence of that. We were talking about Time Bank just a moment ago, how many new accounts they're opening on a monthly basis. But S&P also saying that they do expect real estate prices to increase moderately. Not so keen on the word moderately, but at least there should be an increase. And of course, there's been a big debate because it does not happen very often that house prices across a city or a region like Gauteng have started to go down over a sort of 10 to 15 year period. And yet that in many places is what we've actually seen, particularly while they're going up in one other place. You know the one, I don't think I need to remind you. But certainly just interesting to see a little bit of moderate positivity and optimism from S&P. You're with The Money Show, just gone 6:30.
Travel isn't just about destinations. It's about the people you meet, the cultures you immerse yourself in, the stories you carry home. I'm Relebogile Mabotja, and on my travel feature, I take you on a journey beyond the guidebook. Each week, I connect with fellow travelers, insiders, and storytellers to bring you the heart of every place, whether it's a hidden gem right here in South Africa or a dream destination abroad. Join me as we travel through conversations, memories, and inspiration. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
The Money Show.
The markets.
Little later than we wanted. Sorry about that, Patrick. Patrick Matidi's head of multi-asset strategies at Alawani Capital. Patrick, good evening. U.S. unemployment numbers yesterday, surprising on the sort of, well, I suppose the downside. In other words, unemployment back at 4.1%. And that was unexpected and will feed into some future decisions.
Yeah, good evening, Stephen, and thanks for having me. Indeed, the numbers came in a lot stronger than expected, meaning that the U.S. economy created more opportunities than perhaps what the markets were looking for, which I guess is an indication of the resilience of the U.S. economy, especially in the midst, of all these tariffs that remain, pretty much unconcluded. But I think what it means, though, is perhaps the Fed won't be in a rush to cut rates, largely because the economy is still doing well. So there were expectations that, with all these tariffs, there could be some slowdown expected still, which would give the Fed some scope to cut. But I think at this point, all else being equal, the Fed will probably be, better place to sort of sit on their hands and watch what transpires, especially after the 9th of July.
The end of the Trump tariff window next week, I have no idea what's going to happen. And I suppose the real problem for investors is it's very difficult to predict. We know one or two countries have signed agreements, Vietnam, etc., but really very difficult to know what's going to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's Vietnam and the UK who have since signed. You'll recall that there should be about 100 or so, odd countries that they needed to have concluded by now. Or indications earlier on were for some extension, especially if you listen to the trade minister. But Trump himself was quoted as saying, he may just write a few letters to a few partners, just unilaterally, expressing his desires with the effect from 1st of August. Those are tariffs coming into play. But between now and the 9th, anything can happen. I think we came close with China, but clearly things, did not transpire. And the markets are sitting and watching to see what will happen, given what we saw happening in April when he woke up and announced those tariffs unilaterally also to those 100 or so countries.
It is astonishing, but it would surely, the one thing it will do is keep the gold prices quite nice and high.
Yeah, so there is some flight to quality and safety. So the gold price has actually been buoyed, by this uncertainty. I think it's up another 20 or so percent, year to date, which is good. But I think if you look at the markets, a good recovery from the sell-off we saw in April. So we could be, poised for another sell-off, if there is massive surprise to come through. But I think those who are a lot closer to the situation are sort of calling for a much calmer approach going forward. But again, as to what that means and what that looks like, one needs to see on the 10th when some announcements are coming through.
Patrick Matidi, thanks so much. Head of multi-asset strategies at Alawani Capital.
The Money Show.
The Friday File.
The Friday File.
Well, the biggest horse race in Africa taking place tomorrow, the Durban July at Grootes. It's been run, it's astonishing really, since 1897. Neil Andrews is a Supersport Broadcaster and Anchor. Neil, good evening. I won't say how long you've been broadcasting for, but not quite as long as the Durban July. It is astonishing that it's been so durable. It's got such a good track record. It's been going for so long.
Yeah, it really has been part of the fabric of South African society for many years and continues to be so. Perhaps it's the one rival to what they call in Australia the Melbourne Cup, which is a race that stops the nation. This is our closest version of that. And it's, of course, battled on in recent times against some stiff opposition because there's so many other things to keep people busy in Durban, even during the winter months. But it's still very much loved by, obviously, traditional race punters. But also, I think it's coming back into fashion. Excuse the pun.
We'll get to that in a moment. I mean, horse racing as an industry has had its ups and downs, like many industries. It's also been going for many years. I suppose, I mean, can you gauge the health of our horse racing industry from the Durban July? Is it the best barometer there is?
It is when it comes to event racing, and probably the biggest race on the calendar. And we have in Cape Town the Cape Met, and of course in Johannesburg the Summer Cup. So on that level, yes, but from a day-to-day point of view, no. And you were so right, because back in the day, of course, it was the only game in town. I'm talking about horse racing now. But along came alternative forms of wagering. First the casinos, then sports betting, and of course now online casinos and sports betting. But back in the day, and I forgot the lottery, of course. So with stiff opposition from either side, it's done well to hold its ground. And it's a question now of being taken forward and dealing with what you've got, which it certainly is a challenge.
I mean, for a lot of people thinking of a big horse race tomorrow, not much experience. In my case, I'm afraid to say no experience whatsoever. How do you decide who to take a punt on? I mean, to use a boring technical phrase, what are the elements of your choice, Neil?
Gosh, well, we haven't got that long to analyse them. I mean, it's a complicated game. The simple truth is, at the end of the day, oddly enough, if you stuck a pin in the 18 horses, you would probably statistically have as much chance as I have. We've spent 3 sleepless nights going through everything from, and let me just quickly run through it. So you've got obviously the racehorse itself, which has a pedigree, which from a stallion's point of view, does he stay the 2,200 meters, which is the distance of the race? That depends on who his father was and who his mother was. In horse racing terms, you call it the stallion is the father and the dam is the mother. And then, of course, you can go even deeper, who sired the dam, for example. So there's a pedigree, there's individual form of that horse, how he's competed and performed his entire career. And then on top of that, you get where is he drawn, who's riding him, who's training him, how much weight, that's significant, how much weight he's carrying, what age group he is. So, for example, tomorrow's favourite 8 on 18 is a 3-year-old. So in human terms, that's almost like a 16-year-old. He's about to turn 4, so he's probably sort of 17, 18, and he's taking on some of his older rivals. And in tomorrow's case, he's got, in my opinion, quite a task because he's got a lot of weight to carry. So there are many, many factors. And, of course, this morning it rained in Durban, so there's a little bit of, what is the turf like? Is it good going, soft going, heavy going? So I could keep you for hours. Who's got blinkers, who hasn't? You've done well not to get into the game thus far, Stephen.
No, well, maybe I'm going to have to make a quick trip. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, for someone who's followed it from quite a great distance, I mean, one of the things that always stands out is the names. I mean, are there traditions with the names? The names are always interesting. They're always unexpected. 1 or 2 of them have been quite saucy over the years. Some of them, I mean, when I was growing up in the 80s, for reasons that I can't explain to you, I always remember the name Wolf Power because it's such a great name for a horse.
It was a great name, Wolf Power, and he was a great horse, a grey horse, and really caught the eye. And he did have a wonderful name. So the naming, essentially, tradition is quite interesting because traditionally they were always yearlings, weanlings, yearlings, named by the breeder. These days, breeders actually send a lot of their horses to the sales unnamed, which then gives the opportunity of the owner to name it whatever he or she sees fit. But frequently, the pedigree dictates that. So you would see a horse, for example, who, well, in fact, I've got the card in front of me. So if I have a look at the feature race tomorrow, is race 7, I'll give you a prime example. I'll just dip in here and tell you. So you've got You see, now I can't find a particular one. But, that something would be related to its father. So if it was a horse that, here's a straightforward one. So you've got Pomodoro's Jet, who is not surprisingly a son of Pomodoro, so there wasn't much imagination in terms of that. So you would take the stallion's name and then the mother's name and come up with something rather clever. So that's basically how it works. So you do have certainly some breeders who can sail quite close to the bone, but there's the National Horse Racing Authority who decide whether you can name a horse what you would like to name it, or they say, no, that's a bit cheeky, we're not letting that pass.
So there's actually an authority on horse names. Who knew? Okay.
Yes, there is.
The jockey, I'd ask how big their role is, but that would be the wrong word. How important is it? Obviously, they do matter in this.
Yes, I think I would say that obviously a jockey cannot make a horse run faster. There's no doubt. You can't make a horse run faster than he can. But what a experienced jockey can do, he can make less errors. And what I mean about that is that you can get the pace horribly wrong if you go too quickly, or obviously if you go too slowly. If you're going to be sitting at the back of the field 40 lengths behind, you're not going to be able to catch it up. But in a race like the Hollywoodbets Durban July tomorrow, it's 18 horses. It's extremely competitive. It's a narrow track. And if you get impeded with your run, so to speak, so if you're making your bid for the line and you run up the backside of another horse in front of you, that's not too clever because your momentum's going to be taken out. So in terms of a big race like this, you would like a jockey with experience and obviously ability, but he's not going to be able to make the horse run any faster than he can.
The atmosphere around a race like this, there are lots of people who go for reasons other than watching the race. People do go there to be seen. I don't know if this comes as a shock to you, Neil. Does that all add to the atmosphere, the fact that it's such a big event like that?
Yes, and I've seen that myself because frequently over the last decade or so, when it's become fashionable to go to the races, some people are completely oblivious that there's a horse race on the go. So I'm painfully aware of that. And the only time that they actually move from their buffet seat is not to go put a pick six on, but is to go and make sure that the desserts have been served. So it is a balance. It's a balance of, because you also don't want to go to a track that's empty. So there's no doubt that the appeal of horse racing, there's obviously the wagering appeal that somebody might have 10 Rand on or 20 Rand, but also ladies and men want to dress up, look smart. So that's a huge element. And there is a massive buzz, I have to say. The track tomorrow is going to be packed. I was there rehearsing a little bit earlier on, and there's some wonderful live entertainment. I won't let the cat out of the bag. But it's all part and parcel of it. So if you go to these races, it's very, very difficult not to get swayed. Slightly off the point, I took a friend of mine years ago racing, and he watched one race and turned to me pale and said, I've got to be part of this. And then I ended up buying him a racehorse. So, Stephen, yes, I'd love to take you racing. You might end up actually having a share, maybe a tail in a horse.
I was going to ask who buys horses, and you're not allowed to just say anyone. What I'm really, I suppose, trying to get to, is it something only for the great, good and rich? You can buy it in shares, of course. I think certain English football players, for example, own horses. That tells me it's a game for rich people. But I imagine there are other ways to sort of access the industry as well.
It's interesting you should say that because Michael Owen, the football player, is in the country at the moment. He'll be at the Hollywoodbets Durban July tomorrow. And Michael, who I've had the pleasure of meeting and interviewing and working with a lot via Supersport, has taken it a real step further. He began owning a few horses. He now runs a whole stable and actually brings in some of his footballing friends and so forth who take shares in it. So that is the one side of it, yes. When you go to a yearling sale, there's generally the pick of the sale, which again comes back to what the horse looks like. It's conformation, but also its mother and father, and they are going to go for more rands than something that's perhaps unfashionably bred. So yes, at that level, there's a competition to buy the best looking, but it doesn't transfer necessarily to performance on the track. So the story of horse racing is littered with the worst chuck out at the sales turns out to be the ugly duckling who became a swan, and some very clever man bought it for 20,000 and it's won 14 million, whereas the guy who bought his horse for 4 million he never won a race.
Neil, it's been wonderful to talk to you. I've watched you for many years. We've never spoken. Thanks so much for the time.
Absolute pleasure, Stephen. And tomorrow, 8 on 18 is the favourite. I will tell everybody out there, think a little bit wider. I'm not going for the favourite. I think there's a bit of value to have. So stick that pin in. You may get lucky.
Neil Andrews, the Supersport Broadcaster and Anchor, and of course, will be presenting live from the Durban July tomorrow.
The Money Show.
With Stephen Grootes, live on 92.7 and 106 FM. Streaming on the Prime Media Plus app.
And DSTV channel 856.
Time for the Friday Biz Blitz tonight on The Money Show. You know how this works. I put out a question. If you get it right, we move on to the next question. If you get it wrong, we move on to the next caller. 011 883 0702 021 446 0567. First question tonight on the Friday Biz Blitz. The Durban Winter Handicap is commonly known by what name today? The Durban Winter Handicap is commonly known by what name today? Come on, take a bet.
Travel isn't just about destinations. It's about the people you meet, the cultures you immerse yourself in, the stories you carry home. I'm Relebogile Mabotja, and on my travel feature, I take you on a journey beyond the guidebook. Each week, I connect with fellow travelers, insiders, and storytellers to bring you the heart of every place. Whether it's a hidden gem right here in South Africa or a dream destination abroad. Join me as we travel through conversations, memories, and inspiration. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
The Money Show with Stephen Grootes is brought to you by Absa Corporate and Investment Bank, proud sponsor of the African Blockchain Report 2024.
011 883 0702 021 446 0567. First question tonight on the Friday Biz Blitz. The Durban Winter Handicap is commonly known by what name today? Tandamlilo, hi, good morning from Rosebank. Rosebank in Joburg, yeah?
Good evening, Stephen. It's called the Durban July.
It is indeed called the Durban July, Tandamlilo. And it's been called the Durban Winter Handicap since it started in 1897, became the Durban July Handicap in 1928, but has changed names several times since then. Okay, second question on the Friday Biz Blitz. Which tech company has now surpassed Apple and Microsoft to become the most valuable company in the world? Which tech company has gone past Apple and Microsoft and is the most valuable company in the world? Tandamlilo?
Starling.
It's not Starling, Tandamlilo. You're not far off, though. I'll give you another guess.
I don't know. No, I don't know.
All right, Tandamlilo, thank you. 011 883 0702 021 446 0567. Which tech company has become past Apple and Microsoft and is now the most valuable company in the world? Also questions around Gerry Fourie and Rachel Reeves tonight. But very interesting to get an answer to this. Mandla in Rosebank. Mandla, your name and Rosebank are familiar to me from last week. Do you know the answer?
NVIDIA.
It is NVIDIA, Mandla. Okay, Gerry Fourie is the outgoing CEO of which Stellenbosch-based bank? This has got to be the easiest question, by the way.
Capitec.
Geesh, like you were going to get that wrong. Okay, Rachel Reeves is the finance minister with the most expensive tier of which country? Tier as in crying. Which country is she the finance minister of?
The UK.
It is the UK, man. It's an extraordinary story. Rachel Reeves became visibly emotional during the parliamentary session. UK government bond yields spiked. The pound fell 1%. And we have been told, of course, that it was something to do with a personal matter. Okay, Mandla, here we go. Next question. Agolo and Batonga are hit songs of which music icon from Benin and the first African musician ever selected for a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame? Batonga and Igolo are the songs. The person is from Benin. It's a great question, I have to say.
I'm stumped. No.
Are you? Mandla? Mandla from Rosebank stumped. That would be my headline. You don't know?
No.
Mandla. All right. I'm sorry. Okay. I think we might be running out of time, but maybe. 011 8830702 021 4460567. Agola and Batonga, the hit songs. The person is from Benin. First African musician ever selected for a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Chris in Swane. Chris, do you know?
Yes, it's Angelique Kidjo.
You know, Chris, just for the confidence alone, I'd have given it to you. Yes, he says. Okay. Chris, congratulations. Enjoy your weekend. Chris is the winner of the Friday Biz Blitz on the Money Show. Good evening. It's 7 o'clock.